Composer Libby Larsen is with me. She has a catalog of over 500 works spanning everything from intimate vocal and chamber music to orchestral and opera. She's a Grammy winner, and she comes to New Mexico for the church workshop celebration at the United Church of Santa Fe this weekend. Libby Larsen, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Were you born and grew up in Minnesota?
Basically, yes. I was born in Wilmington, Delaware, but my dad was recruited to Minnesota as the director of research at Pillsbury Company. So the whole family, lock, stock, and barrel, spent maybe a couple of years in Chicago, and then I have been in Minnesota since I was 4 years old.
So how do you become a composer? Was there a time when you just knew it had to be? What were your first inspirations in music?
Good question. I made a decision to use what has been in my brain ever since I was 4 years old. But I decided to actually become a composer when I was about a sophomore in college. But I had been writing music since fifth grade, because I learned how to read and write music in first grade at the school that I went to in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We were taught by the sisters, St. Joseph Sisters of Carondelet, and they taught us to write music in first grade.
So, solfege and
solfege.
Wow.
Yeah, and we learned to write music the same time we were learning to make words and rudimentary kind of math equations. So 2 + 2 is 4. RED is red, and CEG is a chord.
So, where do you draw your inspiration for your music from?
I really lucky because I draw my inspiration just from being alive. I really love to be alive, and I am a kind of an exuberant person. So I draw my inspiration from the energy that's in the air, but that doesn't necessarily mean pitch or rhythm. So it's really a combination of the energy that's already around us, and then the language that we speak, which is its own brand of American English. It's a very rhythmic language. It doesn't work in 4/4 or 3/4 or any of the Western European meters. And so I listen to the way we speak. I've been listening to you speak. You have a very lilting kind of rhythm about your language, and then I will think, okay, I'm going to write a piece. It is going to be for organ. I'm working on an organ piece right now, as a matter of fact. And there's a kind of hope that's in the air lately that hasn't been here for quite a while, but I can feel it. And so I begin to work with pitch and rhythm, almost as if I'm sculpting in sound in my head. The very last thing I do when I compose is actually write the piece down.
So it's interesting. So the rhythm of language influences music, not just on a language base, but the whole time and everything in the orchestra, in the instrumental part of it as well.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Are you also influenced by the rhythms of the sounds around you, the birds, the cars, the city noise, and all that?
Yes. I am more inspired by natural sound. So wind, water, birds, the things that inspired also Bach and Mozart and Mendelssohn, I find the natural rhythms quite deep and quite abstract. I do record rhythms, certain rhythms. The rhythms of old-fashioned washing machines are quite interesting. There are many kinds of rattles that are caused by motors that are loose. A little piece in a motor that's loose, but is continuous, will just spark all kinds of music. I love to improvise. This sounds really weird, but I do love to do this. Go to a laundromat and improvise to the cycles of the dryers, which is so musical, unbelievably musical.
I can completely see that. I mean, the occasion where I'll fall asleep and still have my watch on and hear that, not tick, 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 but the jingle, jangle, jingle, jangle, jingle, jangle of the motor.
Exactly. Exactly, and it's really interesting. And I don't know about your mind, but my mind will pick up on those internal
Right, and then you
cyclical
start
things.
laying melodies
And then
over
start
it.
laying melody. It's like it's just composing by track. Basically, you just do it in your head instead of on a laptop.
And are you keeping all this in your mind, or
Yes.
do you keep a notebook with you and write things
Nope,
down
nope.
as
I
you go?
keep it all in my mind. I always have. Yeah.
Now, you referenced, say, Bach and Mozart and Beethoven, who used to go for walks in the woods. Do you do that? Do you find that nature, getting away from the city, refreshes you?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I'm a kind of a nature woman. I grew up sailing and being out in the water and the wind on lakes, which has its own kind of rhythms and the way the light plays on the water, the way the water splashes if you're, all those things. I'm a long distance runner, so I like to just get out away and run and meditate and listen. I am most at home in the quiet. Even though I talk a lot, I'm most at home in solitude and the quiet, because it's never quiet. All the sounds of nature are just so eloquent. The sounds of the city. I think we're beginning to understand that we may be polluting the air. The potential for peace of mind by filling the air so full of non-natural sounds. So I try to find what is natural and then see if there's a piece of music to be had from it.
And when you're being quiet, do you still have all your own music running through your head, or do you find that occasional moment where it actually goes away and you...
Oh, that's a good question. I have music in my head and always have 24/7. It took me till the middle of college to understand that not everybody has music in their head all day long and all night too. I can call up music in my head, of course, as we all can, pieces of music that we know are being played. But to just have abstract music in your head all the time is something I thought everybody had, but that's not true. But I do. So I have learned how to quiet the music. There's only one place, there's only one thing where the music just quiets down, and that's when I am sitting on a dock in the midst of water. I think it's because of the thousands of modes of oscillation, that water contains within it, and your eyes see those thousands of modes of oscillation, even though it looks like one wave. But for some reason, that's the only time that the music just says, okay, we'll take a break.
That's interesting. I know that visual artists will sometimes, they'll have a blue, a sort of a sky blue that they can look to and sort of reset their color palette before they go back to their work. And I've always thought, for me, it's mountain streams, but I've always thought that that's like a reset of your mind to natural rhythm and to natural sort of noise, natural white noise.
I think you're absolutely right.
And you just need it from time to time.
Really need it. I really need it. I live in Minnesota. We live across the street from a lake in the middle of the city. And we also have a very small house on a very large lake, Lake Minnetonka, which is only a half hour from our house. So I have many docks available. And I make sure that I do, because I think that is true. I can quiet my mind, and it's not the kind of quiet that sort of the din of our culture is creating in our minds, the disquiet, whether it's spiritual or political or, that's not the kind of quiet that docs give me. It's almost as if it's a stillness in the soul that is hard to get.
Who were some of your teachers and inspirations?
Oh, whoa! I have many inspirations. People will say, sometimes when I am at a college, this question will come up: who is in the studio with you? And it's always Chuck Berry.
Really?
Always Chuck Berry. Yep. And Hector Berlioz. is in there. Let's see, James Brown for a long time, just because he redefined one in music, the downbeat. It is not a downbeat with James Brown, and it's really an interesting conversation that goes on. So James Brown. Then there's Lutoslawski, whose music I just adore. For a long time, I was a fan of Shostakovich, and I still am. But I kicked him out of my studio. Now I am really much more interested in composers, because I'm interested in the root of music coming from the language. I am interested in composers who invented music, like James Brown and Chuck Berry. This will sound odd, but Dolly Parton. Composers who use language in a way that creates music that could not exist without their language.
Yeah, irrespective of form that they're working in.
Right. Could you imagine Maybelline without words?
Right, no.
No.
Yet, surprisingly, for Chuck Berry, the chord structure is so much more complicated than normal rock and roll.
It is.
It's not just a 2 or 3 chord.
No, it's not at all. And Johnny Cash is another. Where the chord structures are very. I wouldn't. They move with the language, and the language moves with the chord structures, and they just belong together. And none of it has to do with the way Bach's hands moved on a keyboard.
Has your music evolved over the decades?
Yes, it has. It's gotten. Well, I think this happens to all of us who get older. It's gotten simpler. I really delight in finding the clean line. I wrote a piece actually for this festival, and the title of the piece is "There Is Only One," and the poetry is there is only one horse, and its name is all horses. There is only one fish, and its name is all fishes. But what I finally decided, came up with, it's not really a decision, it happens in my brain, is that the only thing to do is to just work a scale up and a scale down for the entire choral piece, so that it's very simple. It's like it's a 2-line drawing. And that's not the way I was writing when I got my PhD, let's say.
There are composers of the 20th and 21st century, and I can think of John Adams,
yes,
who pursued sort of that mid-20th century semi-atonal, and now they found, often because of a spiritual awakening, that they're moving back to tonal, they're moving back to melodic music. Has something like that happened to you?
Well, I never was atonal, and no, I think I've just gotten older.
And simpler.
Older and simpler. They're in the academy, from which I spring, but also decided not to live in the academy, but to live here in the world. The academy prepares us, those of us who study in that way, to build skyscrapers, and decorate them, and just to make the most elaborate use of the materials, that we've got, and to extend them rationally, and to do all kinds of machinations, and it's really fun to do that. I just have to tell you, it is really fun. On the other hand, who can listen to what you compose? And so I have always pursued the notion of who can hear what I have to say. And I have noticed that, I've been doing this for 45 years now. Our musical culture has changed tectonically. There's no more counterpoint. It's just not in the culture. anymore. And studio sound has given us new musical forms and realigned our ears and our training. So so my music has gotten no, my music. I'm trying. No, I'm trying to keep with the times as they are influencing the common ear of our culture, not the common taste, the common ear.
Without feeling threatened by it or feeling like it's taking away from what you've built on so far. It's more like an evolution of...
Yes, it is. It's quite exciting, actually, because I know what I'm doing. And when I was younger, a lot younger, and had my doctorate, and I thought I knew what I was doing, and I have the degrees and honorary doctorates to support that. But to actually really know what one is doing, whatever art form it is, whether it's in the sound studio or in my own head, is a totally different thing. You don't. I don't pre-think it. I just know it when it's happening, and I know what I'm doing.
But that's experience, isn't it?
I think it is, and age and wisdom and all the great stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This weekend is King's Legacy of Hope. Do you find that Dr. King has influenced your thinking, either for the music that you're doing this weekend or over the last decades?
Yeah, oh, yes. Oh, yes. In so many ways. Just as being... I'm from the era of King and the Kennedy assassinations and, those who would just stand in the face of the storm, that actually has really shaped the way that I have pursued my art in the world, because I'm trained classically, but I'm writing contemporary music into a culture that actually is not asking for any of it. There's not a big demand. But to stand strongly and rooted in the knowledge that what you're doing, needs to happen, as Martin Luther King, did. He wasn't doing it for fame. He wasn't doing it. He was doing it because it needed to be done, and with such dignity, and people were and still are and will be, I think, forever attracted to his energy. He wasn't promoting himself. We're attracted to the truth and attracted to people who are strong in the truth, in their own truths. That, for me, is a great inspiration.
Do you ever become depressed or sad or lethargic because things don't seem to change fast enough, or once they change, they've got to change even more?
I don't get lethargic. No.
I can't imagine from only knowing you a few minutes.
Yeah, I can become deeply frustrated and angry. But I had the great good fortune of working with Jihan Sadat in the mid-'80s, just 2 years after her husband was assassinated. She and I were brought together to work on a piece. And it was a marvelous experience in so many ways. And one of the takeaways from working with her that I learned is how very American we are. And here's what I mean by that. That I realized that I thought that I could change things in my lifetime. That we are decade nostalgic for the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. It's absurd. She is decade nostalgic for the 8000s, right? And she said to me, it takes a long time for change. And what she meant by that was 3,000 years to make a change. In our Native American culture, we talk about 7 generations, before a change can really take root, And I'm not going to be around for 7 generations. I'm lucky if I'm going to make it 3. generations. But the frustration that I used to have, and some of my friends still have this, is that we thought we were going to change the world. We thought it was going to be peace in our time.
And
we really
it would stay changed.
And it would stay changed. We really did. Mm-hmm. That's great. That's the optimism of youth. But then comes the wisdom. That in fact change comes again and again and again before change happens. And those of us that can just keep on walking the path of change, then you just know that you're part of some life force, that contributes to whatever goodness is or whatever evil is. But to be lethargic that it hasn't changed in my lifetime, I think I've been spared that because I was taught by nuns, right before the Vatican Council, when huge change was happening in the church, but it was the change of 600 years. So I've been lucky enough to rub up against some serious change, and to understand that change was brought about by many, many, many generations of people who were shaped by thought.
And you work in an art form that is hundreds, if not thousands of years old.
You're absolutely right. I just don't exist in chronological time. Like I said before, I'm in my studio. I'm about to start a piece, and in that studio is Mendelssohn and maybe Hildegard, and and also Chuck Berry is there. It's like chronological time is a construct of human beings, just like progress is a construct. And I feel really fortunate to swim in an ocean, that has no shores.